Speaking of figuring things out, we do this every year, so we're not going to do it for long today, but we're going to bemoan for a second. We are coming up on traditionally, historically, for 40, 50 years or however long it lasted, the second biggest day for live attendance of professional wrestling of the year, Christmas Day. And I'm going to ask again, is anybody even running Christmas Day this year? And I don't know who it would be unless it's somebody on a very local level. Can you?
I don't know of a Christmas show.
And I mean, it's
a good idea if you're an independent, though. Actually, I think.
Well, no, it's not now because they've ruined it. But it just amazes me every year that we've gone from, tens of thousands of people at dozens of shows to nothing in this period of time. Because if you ran an independent show now, number one, well, maybe all the guys in your local area that, double as stock clerks at fucking Kmart, might want to be on the show. But nobody wants to come in from out of town or from very far. No names want to work anymore. And why would they at this point? It's not one of the big money nights of your year like it used to be. It would be
a show for the wrestlers. A show for the wrestlers with no families and the fans who don't have families to hang out with or want to get away from their families.
So then you sell one ticket to each fucking. Everybody comes in a separate car. The parking lot looks good, and there's 72 people in the building. As we've mentioned, in the territory days, it worked not only for the fans, but for the wrestlers for a variety of reasons. The wrestlers were already in a territory, except if you were the traveling NWA world champion or one of the biggest stars, Andre, etc., in which case you were getting the biggest payoff on one of the biggest days of the year, so you worked that. Everybody was in their home territory. And at least, Greensboro, when it ran on, or Charlotte rather, when it ran on Christmas, everybody lived in Charlotte. Atlanta ran on Christmas. Well, everybody was basically based in Atlanta for the Georgia territory. And when Crockett took that over, it was 240 miles down the road. And actually, most of the time we did Atlanta and Charlotte, both Christmas Day, one at fucking, 2 p.m. and one at 8. It was in Nashville was usually the Christmas night show in the Tennessee territory. They didn't have a big Christmas tradition of a mega show. They just tried to keep the guys close to home. But everybody ran somewhere, and the guys looked forward to it because you could still do. Most of the time, nobody ran Christmas Eve. So you could still do your Christmas Eve, and you could even do your Christmas morning and noon, depending on where the show was, and then, get to wherever you needed to be in the territory. And the buildings were fucking packed because in those days, especially, besides Waffle House, and were movie theaters open then? Well, you weren't alive during some of that. No restaurants were open. There was no any kind of entertainment shit going on. All stores, businesses, malls, everything was closed. Fast food places were closed. So you either, like I said, went to Waffle House or went to a movie or went to wrestling. And once that everybody opened the presents, well, then they're staring at the family sitting in the house with nothing to do. It's usually cold weather. But holy shit, the culmination of all of the big major rivalries that we've been seeing on wrestling for the past few months is happening 15 miles, 20 or 25, 30 miles or however far away from us. And we can go see it for $5 or $6 in those days. And the fan appreciation. Crockett, the one year they would do the fan appreciation price of $5 or $6 per ticket for everybody, man, woman, child. And Crockett did $6 tickets at the Omni and did like $70-something thousand. And Greenville, South Carolina would fucking sell out at $3. They'd give them $3 because the rent on the building there was like fucking $800 in those days. And you'd do 6,000 people. And one year, Crockett actually ran Christmas at the Omni and then came back 7 days later on New Year's Day and did another fucking 7,000 or 8,000 people. So,
why hasn't that translated to wrestling on pay-per-view on Christmas?
Well, because originally, the thing about this, both promotions, the WWE, when pay-per-view became a thing, Crockett, the NWA's big night was already established as Thanksgiving night with Starrcade.
Even before Starrcade, but with Starrcade on a national basis, yeah.
Right, but I mean, that's the thing. They started Starrcade in Greensboro in '83, and that was Crockett's big show of the year. And then they expand to, it was on closed circuit from the very first year. But then they expanded in '85 to the Omni and Greensboro for the live events and closed circuited to a bunch more places. So that was naturally going to try to be what Crockett first did as a big show on pay-per-view. And Christmas 4 weeks later is tough to come back that quick. And then when you think about it, Vince didn't really have a Christmas tradition, but he started the Survivor Series to fuck with Starrcade. So that because and he wasn't going to turn around and try to do another. In those days, pay-per-views were every 3 or 4 months, 3 or 4 times a year. So he wasn't going to try to do another big one 4 weeks later. And then the modern era, as we saw, the territories went away. People stopped running Christmas, and it just never became a thing on pay-per-view or broadcast like it was a live event. But I mean, and we've, in the past, and I assume it's on the YouTube channel, we've gone over big landmark Christmas events and the places that, that did big events. They did them in the AWA. They did them in, for years at Dallas Reunion Arena would sell out Christmas night, 20,000 people or whatever. I was on that one in 1984. It was a $188,000 house on Christmas night in Dallas. So
how about Christmas night 82? That's the night of Flair carrying the cage, the beginning of the Freebird feud. And also that's the night where Santa Claus turns on Dusty and Dusty has to retire and he comes back as the Midnight Rider.
Yeah. And because again, those were big shows in themselves and they took advantage of a big crowd being there to see them to do another even more shocking thing that would start the next program or the next feud or the, next rivalry or whatever. And then they were off and running because all those people that are already willing to buy a ticket had seen that hot thing and had to watch TV and then were going to get sold the next show. So that was the way they kept things moving. And I mean, the guys today, it's lovely for them because they don't have to travel somewhere on Christmas or, take bumps on Christmas or whatever. But again, that's the thing. It's like now everybody's the terrible life of being on the road. We work, sometimes 2 or 3 days a week. Between 1982 and 1995, I had 2 Christmas days off. And one was in 1990, I just quit WCW. And in 91, I hadn't started Smoky Mountain yet. And then the next year, we started running on Christmas night. And I was booking myself on Christmas night. Me and the Midnight we'd do Greenville. I think 1 or 2 years we did Greenville in the afternoon, South Carolina, ate at Waffle House, and then we're at the Omni, that night at 8:00, and that was Christmas dinner.
But with a Thanksgiving or a Christmas, would they have been as successful as they were? I mean, I know the answer already, but I'm asking just to get the dialogue going because it's a silly question. Would they have been as successful if they were just standalone events, not in a city that was run at a minimum 25, 26 times a year, maybe 52 times that year? Regular fans used to coming, have relationships with other fans there because they all come to the same building every week. That's a big part of it too, right?
Well, yeah. And again, when I was just a fan as a kid at the Louisville Gardens, you were there 52 weeks a year, and everybody at the first 3 rows on each side of ringside were reserved by the same people every week for years. And so you knew where everybody not only was sitting, but If they didn't show up, you were worried. Oh, shit. Oh, grandpa must be sick or whatever. So at the Christmas week show in Louisville, and it was like that at a bunch of different places in different territories, the regular fans would bring each other Christmas cards and or bake cookies and or exchange, oh, Carol isn't here yet, but I'll just put her card on her seat because she's supposed to bring me a picture of Tojo. It was the social event. And when you had, in Louisville in the early days, we mentioned when it first caught on, they were doing 4,000 or 5,000 people a week or more regularly. So all of those people then over a period of years sitting next to each other and near each other would talk and get to know each other and blah, blah, blah. But that was their week social outing, and it was different generations. There was plenty of couples that would sit ringside where the guy and his wife were in their late 20s and they had a baby sitting on their lap or two because they couldn't afford a babysitter. So they just bring them because I think in those days you didn't even need a ticket if the kid was like a lap sitter. They had to end under 5 or whatever was free because they knew that they would get parents and families, and that couple's mother-in-law would probably be over in section C talking to somebody else or whatever. So it was all ages, all types of people, and they were regulars. And that was a big deal to go either Christmas week or at Christmas to see the fans. And then you had thousands more that were up in the general admission section that fit what we talked about before. They just wanted to see the big blow off that the kids wanted to go for Christmas, or we don't go down every week. That's why it was a bigger show. But yeah, it was a social situation as well because so many of those people were regulars and knew each other. And in we would get a break for Christmas. Depending on the territory, Jarrett would probably take 2 or 3 days off. Crockett would always, after the 15th or 16th of December, he'd give the guys till Christmas Day. And then the 25th through New Year's Day, except for New Year's Eve, you'd work multiple times a day, depending on whether it was weekends or not, with all the big Christmas week shows. And those would do well.